Good afternoon and good evening. Thank you for joining us. This is the AISA webinar entitled Why Service Learning. I'm Graham Watts. I'm Director of Professional Learning here at AISA, and I am delighted to be joined today by my friend and colleague, who's just there in the box, Tara Barr. Tara, say hello to us.
Hi, everyone.
Tara's joining us from Johannesburg today. I'm sure many of you know Tara because she's developed international expertise in the realm of service learning, and she's worked with many teachers and school leaders in the AISA region. She's spoken at conferences, she's worked with school faculty in school-based professional learning, and she's become a global facilitator of service learning professional development. We are absolutely delighted that she's going to be spending the next hour or so sharing her expertise with us. Tara has already beaten me to it by posting a message in the Zoom webinar chat space. It would be nice for both of us, if you have a moment, to just type your name and say where you are, what school you're at, and if you have any questions, if there's something that you would like us to address during the course of the next hour or so, then you're very welcome to post those questions and I will relay them to Tara during the course of the webinar. Tara will also be asking you to be interactive and to use the Zoom webinar chat feature to post some of your ideas and to work collaboratively. So it is going to be useful to identify the Zoom webinar chat feature, which is you can find in the icon bar on the bottom of your screen. That'll be useful for later on. I will save the comments and questions that you post, and I'll be sharing that with Tara afterwards, so she'll be able to follow up some of those ideas. Now, Tara, I've known you for 5 years, but your journey in our region is much longer than that. Perhaps you could start off by telling us a little bit about your journey and what's made you a passionate advocate for service learning.
Well, thanks, Graham. I'm excited to be here and chatting to everyone tonight for an hour, wherever you are in the world listening. My journey really started when I was young, when I really reflect back and think about my experiences with service. I really started with early experiences in elementary school. Jump Rope for Heart, I don't know if you've heard of that one, the 40-hour famine. I sort of moved on to a CAS experience with the IB diploma in the Kalahari Desert. That was about 20 years ago. That was here in South Africa. Then I sort of went, did lots of training, educational leadership training, masters, all that sort of stuff. And then I ended up back here in South Africa, Manila, been around 17 years international. I'm from Melbourne in Australia, moving back there in July. A little bit nervous about that. Repatriation's kind of scary. But yeah, I've enjoyed my journey, been a consultant, coach, coordinator, many different roles in this journey. So yeah, excited to share that with you.
Wonderful. And Tara's also been the AISA Service Learning Coordinator and has done a fantastic job recently in coordinating the Global Issues Student Summit. So she is very qualified and equipped to lead our webinar today. So I'll hand over to you, Tara.
Thank you. And if you've got any questions or you want to get in touch, here's my details. And if you want to check out the website on Twitter and LinkedIn and all of those social medias, so do get in touch. It's an interactive session, as Graham said. I really want you to ask questions, be reflective, and really stay connected. Sometimes educators feel alone, that they're the only one who is involved in a program such as service learning, and it's really good to share resources and ask questions and bounce ideas off each other. So do stay in touch. So if you haven't already put your information in the chat box, please do that. And I've got a question for you there, and the question is about a question. What questions do you have about service learning? So if I don't get to them today, then I will come back to them and I'll email you personally. Okay. So our learning intentions for today are, by the end of this webinar, you'll understand what service learning is and why do it. We're going to spend about 20 minutes on that. We'll have a look at the research, some of the research, about 5 minutes, approaches to integration, different ways you can integrate service learning at your school, about 15 minutes, and we'll end with a bit of a discussion at the end. So that's kind of how we're going to be working through. Here's our success criteria. So a short term for today, I really want you to be able to describe to others why service learning is needed in education. And I really believe it needs to be in all schools. So I'm really hoping you sort of get the essence of that from this webinar. And then for the long term, I want you to have conversations about why and how to integrate service learning to be able to move your school forward. So really be, set a long-term goal for yourself to ensure service learning is happening at your school effectively. So what is service learning and why do we do it? This is my boy Tom. He's been doing service learning since he was in pre-K. This is obviously an image of him. You can see he's measuring in math and it's connected to a gardening unit. They're also in science. So we'll be getting into a little bit of that during this session, but I want to start with getting you to really think about service learning versus community service, because we really need to see the difference between the two of them. So again, in the chat box, I want you to write what the difference is between community service and service learning. So I'll give you just a minute to add that in. So give me some, what do you think? What comes to mind when you think of community service? Do you have any of these? Do you think of volunteering? And the community service isn't always bad. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think you need to start somewhere in your service learning program, but I mean, and a lot of schools start with community service. I know the school I was at AISJ here 8 years ago was community service before we moved into service learning. And generally it's volunteering, turning up. You might know, it might be a once off, you feel like you're doing something good, but often it's something that is done to others. The needs of the community are not necessarily met or assessed sometimes because we don't really know what the needs are. And that's part of the investigation when you move into service learning. As you can see from the image, if you haven't seen Radiate, I would suggest you check that out. Very entertaining videos, Africa for Norway. This is Who Wants to Be a Volunteer, this image here on the right. And you can check those out online, but it gives you a good example of what, community service is to a lot of international people. Sometimes it's counting hours. I know when I started at the American school in Johannesburg, there were counting hours, and that was part of the IBDP CAS program. We got rid of that in the first year and moved into service learning. So it wasn't about counting hours. I also had a student in my first year who talked about, why am I being punished, miss? And I said, well, what are you talking about? And he said, well, I'm doing, community service, and in my country, it's about a crime. So, we've got to really think about, those connotations with the words we use with students. So he really did feel like he was being punished, even though I'm trying to get him to find passion in the service he's doing. So flipping that to service learning sort of changes that for students. So when you think of service learning, maybe you had some of these things down, the 5 stages, that it is about the community needs, and you really, really deeply investigate the community needs. So you know the type of service that you're going to need to be doing with the community. It's about understanding the culture, local or global issues that are happening, so you go deep into that. The learning that you're doing in the classroom is really applied in the real world. And it's developing those global competencies, those skills and dispositions that we want all learners to have. So how do we develop those skills and dispositions? Well, we get students to set goals and we get them to apply those goals in the service learning that they're doing. And ideally, you want students to find passion. And they don't always know, but it's providing opportunities for them to find passion. And once they find that passion, developing their learner agency so that they can continue long after, you know, they've finished school. That's that intrinsic motivation we want students to have with their learning, and service learning connects so it helps make that learning more meaningful. And we really ultimately want measured impacts in the community and of the learning. So really a well-defined service learning program, you should be measuring the impacts of what you're actually been doing. So here's a definition. I've had many different definitions. I don't know if your school has a definition, but I would suggest if you don't, then you could adopt one or create one, get students or the community involved in creating a definition. So for me, service learning connects positive and meaningful action with the community to help meet the needs and apply learning and skills for transfer, agency, and reciprocity. It's quite a mouthful to try and put all those key things in there, but for me, I feel really that's what it's all about. So if you don't know, service learning is a research-based, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more. You know, if we're really digging into the why, and we'll talk a bit about Simon Sinek in a minute, but it's about students really finding their passion, because they will continue. That mastery of learning, developing those global competencies, reciprocity with the community. It's not us doing something to community, it's about the community sharing their knowledge and skills with us, and us learning from the community as well. And it's about those real impacts and well-being. We really want, you know, our students to be feeling good about what they're doing and helping with the community to want to continue. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. So if I was to define service learning for you in some key components, first you would start with the service. You're working with people, animals, or the environment generally. And the types of service are either direct, indirect, advocacy, or research. And that really depends on the investigation that you've done. We have collaboratives and partnerships, and the collaboratives are sometimes occasional, and the partnerships are sustainable. So when you're choosing a partner, you really want to think about sustainability over time, and lots of, you know, projects students can be involved in, and the connections to the teaching and learning in the curriculum, and how we're going to be assessing that. And when all of these pieces come together, that's really when you have your service learning. Okay. Are there any questions so far, Graham? Am I going too fast?
No questions that you haven't already covered, so that's all good. I just wonder if you could give perhaps an example of a direct versus an indirect.
Okay, so when you think of direct, it's working directly with people, animals, or the environment. When you're indirect, those are your examples of like doing, you know, a drive or donations or creating a website. That would be indirect. So you're not working directly with the person, sort of indirect. You might meet them at the end, but you're not working with them throughout the action. Advocacy would be creating a campaign or, you know, something to, you know, advocate for the rights of others or rights of animals, or standing up for what's right and just. Mm-hmm. And then research is when you're digging really into the science of you know, service. It might be like water quality testing. Like we had a classroom without walls, and we took students and they took water quality samples to test, you know, where students were, where the water quality was and where the pollutants were coming from, and then share that information with the local authorities. Mm-hmm. So it's still helping the community, and it's not just you're doing research and the research stops with you, you're sharing that with the community.
Sure. And a question from Sheila. Sheila says, could you please talk a little bit more about collaboratives?
So collaboratives might be that you have people that come in as guest speakers. So you need to know, like if you've got a program during the year, a unit pops up during the year, you have a list of, you know, key people with expertise that come in. So I'd call them more collaboratives. They're not sustainable because we're not working with them all the time. You might get them in once a year. We used to have a human rights fair, and students, you know, we'd have all of the experts come in and students would, you know, ask questions. But it was really a once a year, you know, the UN would come in, and but it wasn't year long. So okay. Yeah, think of sustainable, you're working with the partners on a regular basis, you know, right. Throughout the year. Yeah.
Okay. Sheila says, got it, thanks.
Okay. So when you're thinking of a cycle, there's many cycles. You've got the design cycle, you've got, the inquiry cycle, service learning. I mean, they all sort of, if you were to show a visual of them, they all kind of stack on top of each other. But this is a visual, that I've created for service learning, and you'll notice the stop signs in the first three are the stop signs, and I really don't want people or students to go any further if they haven't done the investigation before they move on to planning and preparation, because that's where we go back to community service. If we jump right into action, we don't know the real needs of the community. We haven't planned and prepared for the type of action. We don't know the type of action that's needed. So I always ensure that students go back. Reflection happens ongoing throughout the process as well, and demonstration and communication is sharing the learning and the impacts at the end. And that's really the demonstration communication is really a performance task at the end. And we've also created this game board. I call it a game board, and you can call it what you want. But basically, it's the 5 stages, but you can see it's a continuum, and it's got the infinity sign. But you start, and it's set up as a backwards design. So you can see here the investigation starts here, and you work your way around planning and preparation, but you'll see reflection is added in at each section. Mm-hmm. So, and students can move backwards or forwards depending on where they're at. So there's lots of acronyms. There are cards that go with this. This connects to the curriculum, the acquisition, meaning making, transfer, skills, and dispositions. So this can be used as a teaching tool for helping your staff with, there's staff, I've created questions for staff with this, and then there's also questions for students. So they can guide their own learning. That's part of that learner agency and personalising the learning for students. So
it's a lovely kind of planning, doing, reviewing framework.
Yeah, pretty much. But it shows them where they're headed and the necessary steps to get to, completing, an ongoing sustainability of a service learning project that they might be involved in. So, and it shows them, the steps they might need to go back to. And in this way, students can be at different stages in the continuum. Some students move quickly, through the continuum before other students. So, yeah, just lays it all out so they can see it in an ongoing way. So back 8 years ago, we created these service learning standards and benchmarks to integrate into the curriculum. So you can see the standard at the top and then the benchmarks listed underneath. So we have the 5. Learners understand that investigating the assets and needs of the community makes service effective. And these are available on our website, so you can get a copy of those if you're interested. Planning and preparation is learners understand that preparation and planning ensures clarity of purpose to meet genuine needs. And the action is number 3. Learners understand that implementing a plan of action generates change and results. Reflection is learners understand that reflection is ongoing, promoting deep thinking and analysis about oneself and one's relationship to society. And demonstration communication. Learners understand that through sharing their demonstration and communication, they solidify their understanding and evoke response from others. Mm-hmm. So I'm not really diving into the what of service learning as much today, really looking more at the why are we doing it.
Just a couple of questions, yes. Tara, to relate to you. Alexandru asks a big question. Does it matter the size and impact of service learning? And I'm sure that's something you're going to cover during the course of today. And more specific question from Sheila. Are these the 5 stages of service learning by Kathy Berger-Kay?
Yes, they are, but they've been developed further.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we ask students, if they were to define service learning, these are some examples. So I'm collecting a lot of data with some of the schools I'm working at to include in a book and to sort of share probably next year. But, we should be really talking about students about what they think, what their responses are. So here are some responses. So I have a quick read of those, and then we're going to do a quick reflection in the chat box.
So what age were these students, Tara?
This is a range of students from middle school to high school.
Okay.
So my question is, does it matter how students define service learning? What do you think? So if we're looking at the research, clarity is pretty important, and so is consistency. So I would say that it does matter that they have something similar. I mean, I thought all those responses were really good, but this was data that was collected early at the start of the year, and what students think what service learning is. So I'm really interested to see, as you collect data over the year, should be able to see a progression. So I'm looking forward to the next collection of results, and I have lots of examples. If you need some examples, let me know.
So over the course of the year, you're likely to see students gaining more of a shared understanding, because they may come in with, if there are 20 kids in the group, 20 understandings. And I suppose what you're assessing is their conceptualization of service learning.
Exactly. And if you've got a definition, do they understand the definition? Does everyone in the school understand that definition? That's where we're trying to get to, the visible learning collective efficacy, that we want, the whole school to have, that every student can learn, and everyone has the same understanding of what is service learning. So I'm hoping some of those, the feedback that it's very similar on the next collection of data. So what does the research say? We're talking about visible learning. I'm a bit of a fan, being Australian, and John Hattie's in Melbourne. I'm looking forward to getting back there. So
but he is a Kiwi originally. I'm just pointing that out.
I know, he is a Kiwi.
As a New Zealand passport holder, I'm just pointing that out for accuracy.
Right, so I'm going to be sharing some resources throughout the workshop, but if you haven't read Visible Learning, I suggest you do. The effect sizes, and I'll share the PowerPoint with you in slides, but I've hyperlinked everything. So if you haven't looked at these 250 effect sizes, it goes into the influences on student achievement, and it's fascinating, really, reading the data of all these 800 meta-analyses that John Hattie has collected over the years. It's fascinating. I mean, he's still collecting more and more and learning more and more about what we should really be doing in schools and what really impacts learning. And I don't know if you've seen the barometer of influence, but it sort of breaks it down a little bit there. So basically, on your barometer, you have 0.4 is a normal year's growth for student learners. Oh, sorry, my screen just went weird. Sorry, I just switched slides. There we are. 0.4 effect size on learning. So anything below is actually, not really a year's growth for learners. And some of these are reverse effects. So we know summer vacation is one of the worst things for learners, yet we still have, 2 months off for summer vacation. So, maybe that's some of the stuff that, we need to address in online learning for learners. And, and the highest effects are collective teacher efficacy. But if we have a look at service learning, you can see the effect size is up here, and I've actually emailed John Hattie and got a response from him, and I do believe it's actually further up here. So I'm really looking to collect more data, and if you're interested in collecting data in these meta-analyses, then let me know so we can share that with John. But we want all learners in this blue zone, and that's what it's all about, is looking at what we're doing in the classroom, what students are doing, and making sure that they are actually having greater learning in all classrooms, in all of our classes. So I suggest you have a look at that. Like I said, I've linked some of those in. There's a recent article, Nurturing a Global Mind in Harvard, and they talk about 5 activities that, develop and enhance global competencies. And this is some of the research that's been done. Here's some of the global competencies, but these are the top 5. So service, to help people in the wider community, celebrating cultural diversity, learning about different cultures and different perspectives, participating in classroom discussions about world events, learning to solve conflict. Well, guess what? All of those you're doing in service learning. So,
Tara, which slide are you looking at the moment? I'm still looking at visible learning.
Oh, are you? I don't know why I've lost my other screen. It's just disappeared. Sorry. Are you there now?
I've still got visible learning with the barometers.
I don't know what's going on. Is that better? Can you see the service learning one?
No, it's still the same one.
Something's wrong.
Okay, this is where we need technical assistance.
Hang on. Let me just...
Okay, so Alexandru says, yes, it's the screen of visible learning. Yeah. Visible. it's still the visible learning barometer.
Yeah. Oh. Can you see it?
That's it, yeah.
All right. Okay, my other screen turned off, so I do apologize. This is the screen I was on. Did you get to see this one?
Do you want to just recap on that, on the visible learning research by John Hattie?
Sorry, technical difficulties, dual screen. So, as I was saying, here is where service learning is. And I believe it's a higher effect size. It's up more closer to this end. But there's not enough meta-analyses that has been done on service learning. But the ones that have been done put it up here at 0.58 effect size. So how do we get, you know, all of our learners in this area? And we know it's a proven pedagogy from the research that's been done. So we should be using it. You know, if we know it actually has the zone of desired effects, we should be, you know, making sure that we're using that as a pedagogy in our classrooms.
And it's a useful tool when having conversations with our colleagues around why service learning.
Exactly, you know, and you've got to go back to the research, and that's why I've really, I love using John's research as part of the why and why we should be doing it because it's real data. You know, it's, you know, 30,000 students, 30 million students that were, you know, that have been surveyed. So go back and check it out. And, you know, I've got all the links to the books and some of the sources on there, so you should really have a look. So I was just talking about the Nurturing a Global Mind by Harvard, the new research from Harvard. And, you know, like I said, I've linked all of these documents so you can go check them out. But these are their top 5 that I just went through. And all of those are part of service learning and a service learning program. So again, if you know, we want students to demonstrate these global competencies, then we need to provide opportunities in the curriculum like service learning to make sure that they are definitely getting them. I'm just going to throw in a few other resources. If teachers are really interested in looking at intercultural understanding, ethical understanding, critical and creative thinking, personal and social capability, the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority has a great learning continuums of all of these that you can have a look at. And again, all of them apply to service learning. So again, check out that website for learning continuums. And, you know, when you really think about how are we, if we say that we're living our educational goals, how are we actually doing that? How are we measuring that? And I know there was a question about that before, you know, measuring our impacts. If we're not measuring our impacts, how do we know it's working? So really, there needs to be more of a drive towards how are we collecting that data? How do we know we've had an impact with the community? And we've developed a few tools. So I'm really interested to hear what other schools are doing on that. But I mean, if you read, you know, the Melbourne Education Declaration, you can see all of those things: being active, informed citizens who commit to national values of democracy, equity, justice, and participate in Australian civic life. How can you not be achieving that? Like, how do you achieve that in other normal subjects? What are people doing? I'm really interested to hear how we're achieving these goals. If we say this is a goal, how are we doing that? How are we acting responsibly at a local, regional, and global level? So yeah, again, another resource if you want to check that out. You know, I like to tell everyone there's a big warning. Service makes you feel really good. It's actually been proven that, you know, it's the same happiness feeling that students get as similar to social media. And one of the feedbacks I got from a student was literally that I could go home and watch YouTube, and literally I won't be smiling like I am when I'm doing service. So, it's definitely part of that, well-being that we want students to have. So again, I would definitely include that in your curriculum. That release of oxytocin that students get from, the high that they get from social media, it's very similar in service. I don't know if you guys have looked at Simon Sinek. I'm sure you have. I mean, everyone knows his why, but the millennial questions are really good to use with students. I've used that. Understanding empathy and, starting with why. I've also been having a look at his other book, Finding Your Why, which is really good for working with teams. So check those out. And this is one thing I like with Simon's work, is the golden circle. And the reason why I've included this is because we really need to be digging more into the why and the how rather than the what. And I think we start more of like, what is service learning, rather than why we should do it, and, getting into that how. And the reason we need to look at the why is because it's part of the limbic brain, which is your behavior, your decision-making, your feelings, which is, why you would continue to do it, So we need to be able to tap into this and the purpose of why that's important. Your what really connects to your neocortex, which is the rational analytic thought. So again, check out, Simon Sinek's work, and, he'll explain that further for you. But just another thing to be mindful of. So again, another little moment for you to reflect on a time you served. Why did you do it, and how did it make you feel? So I'll give you a minute to just type in an example. Don't you love that squirrel? Doesn't he just make you want to smile? I think I need him as my screensaver every day. It's just like lovingly looking at nature.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. Any examples that we could share there, Graham?
Well, I typed in that I got a buzz from service as a school board member. It gave me a buzz to, well, ties with what you were saying, that sense of giving, the joy of giving and sharing. It releases all the well-being neurotransmitters, acetylcholine and endorphins and so on. And we've also got another comment that somebody volunteered, Giovanna volunteered weekly with adults with developmental disabilities. I often brought friends with me, and I just felt so much pride in the clients we served. And Sheila says, made me feel a sense of purpose and connected to others, which is interesting, of course, because we live in an age when so many people are not connected well, they're connected virtually rather than a face-to-face sense.
Disconnected, yeah. So yeah, it is. It's about that personal connection and really, like I said, developing those communication, collaboration, teamwork, leadership skills, critical thinking, problem solving. That all happens when you get together. I mean, you can have the best plans, going out to your service, project, but you may have to change those. It teaches you adaptability, flexibility, some grit, sometimes perseverance. So, that's important, but definitely the well-being factor. I really am interested in exploring that a little more. I hope to come back with another workshop on that at some stage. So we're going to move into the approaches to integration. Should be about 15 minutes. If you've got questions, feel free to pop them in. I just created this, upside down pyramid of the approaches to service. And there's so many different approaches. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I want you to just think about what approaches do we do at our school and what could we be doing or what could we be working towards. So you might be starting with drives and donations or after school activities, and after school activities really link nicely with, you know, some of the programs that you do. So I'm not saying that you should, you know, sort of kick those out of your program. There's definitely, you know, room for them to be in the program. Just, you know, what's the purpose of the things that you're doing? Really think about that. Go back to the why are we doing what we're doing, and what's the service learning involved in that. You might have Classroom Without Walls, CWW, or Week Without Walls programs, which are essentially camps where you might go for a week somewhere. Sometimes you can't do service in the country that you're living in, so you might need to, you know, fly to another country to be involved in that. Sometimes people have field trips, you know. These are just some other ways that schools have, you know, involved service or service learning in their programs. Other programs, like I said before, the IBDP, which has CAS, Creativity Activity Service. You might have the IB, the MYP, the PYP, you know, there are many global citizenship programs, all sorts of different things that you may have included. You may be doing unit integration. That might be just 1 or 2 units here and there in your school, mightn't be the whole school. So, you know, good place to get started is thinking about your unit integration. You may have a whole subject, which is specifically, such as, you know, global citizenship, that, you know, really digs deep and all of the units connect to service. You might have school-wide units, which is, you know, where I was at AISJ, we had school-wide units in every grade level, all the way from, you know, pre-K to grade, you know, up to grade 12. Then, you know, you could have a more, you know, alternate program, which is going to another level, which, you know, is really conceptually inquiry driven. And I say that because I feel that is the way that all of our units should be, you know, really pushing for the future, is that it's concept driven and it's really integrated across subject areas, and not just across subject areas or across grade levels, but vertically as well. So how could students have agency with the units that they're doing? They choose what units they're interested in doing, and teachers could also choose what they're passionate about and interested in doing. So that's kind of where we're at with our ServLearn curriculum. So if you're interested in that, I've got some examples on the website, and, you know, we can talk a little bit more. If anyone's got any other examples, you can put them in the chat. Feel free, I can add more to the approaches of service pyramid and flip it around. If you know, think I should turn that around or change that diagram, let me know.
So Tara, a quick question. If I'm approaching service learning in my school for the first time, if we have a community action or some sort of outreach program going on,
yeah,
can that be converted to service learning?
Yes, definitely. And that's what I was saying, you know, like when I started at ASJ, it was really, you know, there were some after school activities. It wasn't really in the curriculum. It was definitely, there were lots of donations and drives, just, you know, people randomly, you know, donating, you know, there's a clothing drive here, bring your clothes in, but no one knew what the drive was for or what the purpose was or who the organisation was. There was no one coming in to explain the need, you know, for that drive. So, you know, you might have, you know, a bake sale, but then there's no sign, you know. So at least when you're having a drive or a donation, really go to the purpose of what's the purpose of that? How much are we trying to raise? How is that going to benefit the community? You know, when you do donations and drives, that's out of your hands once, you know, you donate it to the community, but how do you know where the money's being spent? You know, that was some things that sort of popped up, you know, when I first started here many years ago, that, you know, you didn't know how the money was being spent. So how do you, you know, share the impacts with the community? Oh yeah, well, we raised this much, but you don't know really what that money has been spent on. Okay. So I would just dig in a little deeper into that. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, and sometimes you need to do a drive and a donation. That's indirect service that you know you need to do for your partner, and that's what their needs are. But don't base your whole program around drives and donations. Is what I'm saying, you know. And like I said, after school activities gives kids more choice, of what they're interested and passionate in, might be an animal shelter that doesn't necessarily always connect in the curriculum. So it's giving those opportunities again for kids to experience service. Sometimes it's the first time, you've got to give them those opportunities, but those are well-established programs, the after school, programs. Those are the sustainable partners that you're collaborating with. Whether it's working in the environment, working with animals, or working with people, might have a school or you're planting trees, there's so many different, I can give you millions of different examples on that. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good. So, again, more examples of why integrated into the curriculum. Again, it's that meaningful connections with the content, the knowledge, and the skills. So applying what you're learning in the classroom in the real world, because we talk about that, and usually we give, these performance tasks that are not really, real performance tasks. So really making sure that we're connecting, what we're doing in the classroom with the real world. We want students to demonstrate their understanding, their skills, and the transfer for mastery. And again, that's that performance task that I was telling you about. That's the demonstration communication. Student agency and voice, developing student leadership and mentorship. We had a program that all the students were leading, the teachers weren't leading it, the teachers are facilitators. Ideally, that's what you want to work towards. So look at where you're at. How do we get more student leadership? How do we empower students to lead their projects? How do they mentor other student leaders? While they're developing all these wonderful global competencies. We need consistency across the school in your program. So, and I found that this has happened a lot with international schools, is that, you develop a great unit and then that teacher leaves and a new teacher comes in and that unit goes out. So then the partnership drops, the learning, is lost, and then you're starting again. And that's, sometimes you need to reevaluate, your curriculum and redo that. But you do need some consistency to see the growth of the service learning with some of those partners and in your curriculum. You refine it each year. And again, it's a visible learning pedagogy and it's supported by research. So, those are a lot of the reasons of why we need to integrate it into the curriculum. I mentioned before a little bit about your vision and mission. And for me, this is our moral purpose of schools. Our vision and mission explains why we do what we do. And if you look at your keywords in your vision and mission statement, you're going to find that it connects to service learning. So I don't know if you've got an example you've got near you or it off your head. Here's a couple of examples that, that I'm just going to share with you, but you can see in bold the keywords that stand out. How are we living our vision and mission? And I challenge you to challenge your school about that. Where's the data to prove that you're actually doing that? So have a look. This is our Serve Learn co-vision mission. We believe that integrating service learning through conceptual inquiry in schools around the world, young people will develop the skills necessary to be agents of change in our community. Dig into yours. I want you to have a look at your iceberg of why service learning. Again, maybe not the best visual, you could come up with something else, but have a look at your, what is actually seen, what is above sea level? Is your vision and mission, is it visible in your school? Does everyone believe it? Does everyone value it? Yeah, and then go a little deeper. What can't we see? Are we still exploring the service learning at our school? It's happening in little pockets, little fragments. Are we collecting data on the service learning? Do we know the impacts of the service learning? So that's where I want you to go a little bit deeper at your school. And then how we lead really makes a difference. So how is leadership supporting the service learning that you're doing at your school? And if they're not, what are you doing to help lead that and provide students with those leadership opportunities? So I want you to reflect on your school iceberg. What's your service learning iceberg? You might want to put that in. You might have no service learning. You might have community service moving towards, maybe you've got, you know, your iceberg is flipped. Maybe you've got that much is visible with your vision and mission and your service learning. So just pop something in the chat box. Any examples there, Graham?
Sure. At LIS, which I think is Luanda, our iceberg would be represented by the 3 programs, PYP, MYP, and DP.
Yeah.
And we have another question that came a wee bit earlier. Thinking about CAS in the DP, it's encouraged to apply knowledge from subject areas. What could be some ways of doing this? Perhaps that's something you want to loop back to a little bit later.
Yeah, again, I go back to the concepts, and really, you know, your subject areas should be really driving their units with, you know, conceptual inquiry units. And, you know, there's many concepts in the IB that would, you know, transcend across subject areas. So I'd really have a look at that. I've got a unit that we developed years ago for science that I could share from the IB. And yeah, so just let me know if you want a copy of that. So again, here's some more examples. Again, hearing from our students why they're involved in service learning. Just have a quick read of those. Teaches you about the world and how to make a difference.
I particularly like the one, the second one down, learn how to be caring.
Yeah.
Citizens.
Yeah.
Sometimes we think some people are caring and other people aren't. The idea that you can learn to be caring, I think is interesting.
Yeah. Well, and that's all about students self-assessing where they're at. You know, we've developed rubrics for students to self-assess their empathy, you know, and set goals like, you know, how would I actually demonstrate that I have, you know, developed empathy. So that's some of the data that we're collecting on student learning and them self-assessing. So again, the 5 stages are all completely self-assessed by students as well. Again, developing that learner agency and efficacy. If you were to look at some of the challenges, and I hear so many different challenges of why services are happening in our school and what can we, you know, no. So when we look at the challenges, we should look at, you know, also some of the benefits that you're getting from the program. Yeah, you might start out with challenges at the start in your program, but the benefits far outweigh the challenges, and there's always a flip side. So fear is always one of the biggest factors that comes into, you know, having an effective service learning program. But, you know, you could be completely brave and take some risks and try something new and, you know, see what the impacts are. Change is hard. People struggle with change in school. So we've got to really look at where people are at and how to get people to where they need to be. And again, it goes back to your vision and mission and the purpose of the school. You know, it's about student learning, and we need to be living our vision and mission, or otherwise we're here in the sky with our vision and mission. We're not really living that. People are scared of the unknown, don't know what that's going to be like. Again, got to be brave, take a step, try it. You know, if it doesn't work, you know, it's not the end of the world as long as we are learning from those experiences. But you can use action research to explore the unknown, you know, so you can find out more about it. And that might be investigating the community, taking a visit out to the site. Safety and security is another one that comes up with schools. Some schools, international schools, can't you know, go out because of security. So you can bring, you know, your partners on site as well. So that's also, you know, a possibility. You don't always have to leave the school campus to go and do service. So think about all the different types of service you can do and the different ways of doing that. Scheduling gets in the way of learning sometimes. So we, you know, sometimes there's a schedule that's so perfect we can't add new programs in or adjust scheduling. So scheduling has come up several times, you know, schools that I've been consulting with, but, you know, we really need to look for different opportunities and possibilities with our schedules to make sure that the learning is driving the scheduling, not vice versa. Lack of understanding, easy. We need to build understanding. And again, that comes back to time and the resources to be able to provide the understanding of what it is, why we do it, you know, and repeating that with new teachers coming in as well in your school. Might be community partnerships. Hard to find community partnerships or they're too far away. So it's being really creative about partnerships and collaboratives, but we really want collaboration for sustainability. So when you're really looking at your partners, you want to dig into that. And resources. Talk to your leadership team, making sure you've got the resources to be able to have the program. You know, if you need time, make sure there's scheduled time. If you need, you know, a budget, you know, ask for the budget or, you know, fundraise for the budget. If you need, you know, other resources, you know, equipment for students who are working with the school, you don't want to be borrowing it off other teachers. You need to think of all those resources that you need for the program. So talk to your leadership team and they can get that sorted. So I want you to just have a final little reflection here, a visible thinking strategy. I used to think and now I think. So what did you think about service learning? And what do you now think about service learning? If you could just write that in the chat box, that would be helpful. Okay, I'll get you to read a couple of those to me, Graham. I'm going to put this up as well for people to be able to do in the next thing. So can you share some with me? Sure. I used to think and now I think.
Sure. So from Alexandru, I think it's more of a hands-on approach, even though it can also be done remotely.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, you've made some really important reminders for those people, particularly who are perhaps thinking about the implications of taking students off-site. Of course, we can access experts, collaboratives, partnerships digitally or virtually, so we don't need to leave the classroom. Sheila is saying that it's reassuring we're on the right path. The information that you have provided has been very helpful.
Oh, thank you.
I used to think service learning was the responsibility of one teacher. Now I think it's the part of every teacher's role.
It's the whole school approach. If we keep putting it on to one teacher, what happens when that teacher leaves? It goes with them, and that's really sad, you know, and how do we have that, you know, continuum of learning, you know, where all students have access? If we want these skills and dispositions that we want kids to have for the future, we need to be embedding it in the curriculum and providing those opportunities, however that may be. So I've put up the survey and I really encourage you to do it because it helps you know where your school's at, you know, and there's key questions on all of those things that I've been sort of talking about. But take the survey. I'm happy to give you a little free, you know, Skype conversation where we can chat about it and, you know, maybe, you know, can help advise where, you know, your next steps are. Might be professional learning, maybe it's time, you know, clarity, consistency, all those sorts of things. So take that. We have some institutes coming up if you're interested. The Service Learning Summer Institute on Service Learning and Sustainability. If you're interested in joining us in Greece, it's going to be amazing. The dates are the 25th to the 29th of June. So check that out. And this is on the events on our Serve Learn website. And there's also a Student Service Leadership Institute to develop student leaders. So if you've got you can identify those students that could lead the whole program, and I bet you have them. So get onto that, get them interested. And there's the dates, the 2nd to the 4th of July. During the summer, summer learning, that's what we need for our students, because 2 months break is not good for student learning, so that they can be the agents of change at your school. Fantastic. And ooh, a raffle. Ooh, I know you're excited. See, yes, that's exactly what I wanted to go. So, usually I give out mugs, but I've stopped because they're really too heavy to carry. So I'm thinking of other things. And if you've got other great ideas for giveaways, let me know. But first, I'd really like you to follow Serve Learn on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, so you can stay in touch. Post a comment about the webinar today, and there's some hashtags there. And I am willing to give you a starter Serve Learn resource pack, which is not available on our website just yet, but I'm willing to give you that starter pack and a discount on the Summer Institute, whichever one you're interested in doing. So now it's time to discuss. I'm going to leave that up, but we've got 5 minutes still to do our discussion. So feel free to get those questions going.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have any questions, please feel free to post that. I will go back to kind of a big picture question that came a wee bit earlier, which was, I'm just going back. Does it matter the size and impact of service learning?
The size of impact, well, it depends on your program. It depends what you're measuring, really. Ideally, you want to be measuring from pre-K to 12 and the impacts with your community partners as well. So you should be trying to measure all of those. So it depends where you're starting. Maybe you're just measuring the learning in your own classroom. From them not understanding what service learning is to having an understanding of what that is. Ideally, we want kids to be able to do service learning on their own, to be intrinsically motivated, to be doing it in university and after they've left school, and we know that it does work. At AISJ, students, after they'd finished school, the only time they got together in an alumni meeting, they all discussed the time that they meet up is to go and do service together. So, I know that it does impact kids, and it does have a lifelong impact. So, that's the ultimate for me, is that kids are doing it after they've left school. So
sure.
And
it becomes habit forming. Service, I guess one of the outcomes we're all looking for is service as a habit rather than as a one-off project.
Not just a one-off thing, and it might be just finding, like I said, finding your passion, finding something you're really interested in, you want to just keep doing, and if you haven't found that, keep looking, you'll find it. There's so many opportunities, but know the impacts, know the needs of the community thoroughly. Like I said, do those 5 stages, and you'll be right. And that's what we want our kids to do. So they know the needs and the impacts. We don't want them going in and doing harm to our community. It's not fair. They really need to know the needs before they do that.
It's about being considered and intentional and ethical in reaching out to our wider communities.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so we're out of time for today. I want to thank Tara for giving of her time, and there are lots of opportunities there to stay in touch with Tara. Tara is going to add the PDF of today's PowerPoint to the Serve Learn website, so you can access that. And Tara's given you ways to communicate with her and get in touch with her if you have any further questions. The AISA has a community of practice that any AISA school member can join. You can access that through the AISA website, and Tara coordinates that for us and is the facilitator on there, the voice of service learning. And Tara will be back next semester with a follow-up. looking at how to integrate service learning, how to take the next steps, how to embed and sustain it into the longer term. If you have any questions, or if there's anything in particular you'd like us to address in the next webinar, then please let me know, or Tara, and we will make sure we build that into the to the next webinar. So we have, I love finishing exactly on time. So I want to thank Tara for joining us this afternoon. And thank you everyone for being with us. Goodbye for now.
Thank you.